Why did God punish Israel for eating the quail that he sent for them? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Numbers on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Numbers chapter 11. We're going to be reading from verses 31 to 35. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Numbers chapter 11, beginning at verse 31. Now a wind went out from the Lord, and it brought quail from the sea, and left them fluttering near the camp, about a day's journey on this side, and about a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp, and about 2 cubits above the surface of the ground. And the people stayed up all that day, all night, and all the next day, and gathered the quail. He who gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was aroused against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very great plague. So he called the name of that place Kibroth-Hattaavah, because there they buried the people who had yielded to the craving. From Kibroth-Hattaavah, the people moved to Hazeroth and camped at Hazeroth. In this chapter, we've been dealing with the murmuring of Israel. They were on their journey from Mount Sinai to Canaan. They were currently in the wilderness of Paran, as our map shows, and would have different encampments in this wilderness on their journey. Our map does not show many of these encampments because we do not know where these places are exactly. During their journey in chapter 11, the Israelites were complaining that they did not have any meat to eat, but only had the manna. They desired the meat like they had in Egypt, meat that would taste good. Upon his discussion with Moses, God promised to provide Israel with meat, but by the time they were done with it, they would be sick of it, for God was displeased with their murmuring. After appointing elders from the children of Israel to assist Moses in his duties, in today's reading we have God fulfilling his promise to send Israel meat. Verse 31 says that a wind went out from the Lord, which brought the quail from the sea. As we saw in Exodus, quail was not foreign to the area around the Red Sea. However, to get them to Israel was. The wind patterns would need to be changed, something that the Lord was fully capable of doing. God thus used a natural process, the wind, in order to accomplish his purpose. However, this wind was controlled by God. The quail, when they arrived, were left fluttering near the camp about a day's journey on both sides of the camp. This shows us that God wasn't going to bring these quail directly to the camp, perhaps like he did the manna. No, instead, he was going to make the children of Israel work a little bit and travel out a day's journey to get the quail. In order to facilitate the children of Israel being able to capture the quail, it seems that God also caused the birds to fly about 2 cubits above the ground, which is about 3 feet off the surface of the ground. The quail were so numerous that the people gathered quail for 2 full days and 1 full night. The sheer number of quail meant that in this way, God did perform a miracle, in that there wouldn't normally be this many quail in the area. In total, the people who gathered the least amount of quail gathered 10 homers, meaning that others gathered above and beyond that amount. Now from Leviticus, we said that 1 homer equaled 10 ephahs, which in turn equaled about 225 pounds. If those calculations are correct, then the one who gathered the least gathered 100 ephahs, equating to 2,250 pounds of meat. Now this doesn't mean that each person in Israel gathered this much, but those people among the families who went out gathered this much. Needless to say, this was a lot of meat. From this we learn that unlike the manna, which was sent daily, the quail would only be sent once, and thus a month's supply was taken. Once the people returned to the camp, the quail was divided among the camps so that everybody had plenty. However, once the quail was prepared and being eaten, no sooner had it been put in their mouths that the Lord had struck them with a plague. Why did the Lord do this, seeing as how he provided them the quail? Because they murmured against him and did not appreciate what he had provided for them up until that point. Verse 20's promise to Israel about the quail also came with a promise that they would regret eating the meat. Moses would have delivered this warning to them, at which point, if Israel had been righteous, they would have repented and asked the Lord not to provide the quail, but be content with the manna. But no, they went on full steam ahead, consequences notwithstanding. Verse 20, though, didn't describe how the Lord would make the meat loathsome to them. Verse 33 does. What this plague was, we don't entirely know, but it was bad enough that some of them died. They thus called the place Kibroth Hattaavah, which means graves of craving, for it described why the people who died there were buried there. This should be a lesson for us. We need to learn to be content with what we have and not always be seeking to obtain more. The children of Israel were greedy here, and they were ungrateful, and they were punished for it. God has provided us with so much, especially in Christ if we are Christians. Let's thus learn to be content and give God thanks for what we have. After this incident was complete, probably about a month, Israel journeyed from there to Hazeroth, where they stopped to camp. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Numbers chapter 12, verses 1 to 9, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.